We're going to continue to solve trigonometric equations, and this time, in this particular equation, we're going to use factoring as a trick or a strategy. Before I can attempt to use factoring in this particular problem, I'm going to get all the terms of the equation on the same side. And when I do that, I'm going to get sine x times tan x minus sine x is equal to 0. Now I see on the left-hand side of the equation I have two terms, and both of those terms has sine. I'm going to factor out sine x from the first term, and that gives me tan x. When I factor sine out of the second term, I get -1. Notice, if I use the distributive property, I will get the upper line back again. Now this almost looks like a quadratic equation, or an equation where we can use the factoring method. Something times something is equal to 0. The only way we're going to get 0 for an answer when we're multiplying two things together is if one or the other of those two things is equal to 0. So I'm going to set both of these factors equal to 0. Over here, I'm going to get tan x alone on one side, which gives me tan x is equal to a +1. Now I'm thinking, what angle do I know from my charts that when I take the sine of that angle, I get the answer +1? And as I think about that, I realize that between 0 and 2 pi, there are a couple of places where that will happen. I know in quadrant 1, all ratios are going to be positive. I also know that tangent produces a positive ratio in quadrant 3. The angle which produces the positive ratio in quadrant 1 is a 45-degree angle. And over here, if this is 180 degrees, and I add 45 degrees to it, I get 215 degrees. Now, when we're reporting the answers to trigonometric equations, we really don't want to report our answers in degree measure. We want to report our answers in radian measure. And 45 degrees is equal to pi over 4, and 215 degrees is equal to 5 pi over 4. So those are two answers I get from the tangent part of the problem. Over here, I'm thinking about when I will get the ratio 0 for the sine function. Now there's a number of ways I can get that, but personally I like to think about the graph of the sine function. And when I think about the graph of the sine function, I see that we can get 0 wherever that graph intersects the x-axis. That means when I've got 0 degrees, or here when I have 180 degrees. What about here? Well, here happens to be 360 degrees, which is the same as 2 pi. And you can see up here my instructions say to get the answers between 0 and 2 pi. This indicates that 0 is included, but this curved part here says less than 2 pi. So I'm not going to include this point of intersection in my answer. And now I'm going to convert my answers to radian measure because I know that's appropriate here. So I get 0 radians, and 180 degrees is equal to pi radians. And so I have 4 answers to this equation: 0 radians, pi radians, pi over 4 radians, and 5 pi over 4 radians. Those are the 4 correct answers to this particular problem. And that's all.